This is Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley. I'm the fellow who has a hyphen in my name. The hyphen is silent, but I am anything but that. From the sunny hills of the town of Blue Mountains, Jeremy Wentworth-Stanley, the voice of Respectonomics, and my co-host Sarah Benton. And Sarah, before I say good morning to you and good morning to everybody else, you have to have one quick guess what we're going to be talking about this morning.
Latin?
No, it's not Latin. No, it's English.
There we go.
Use of English. And then we're going to be talking about use of English because, as everybody knows, the whole sort of activity of scripting and reading and newscasting and all that kind of stuff, basically, use of English has become useless English. Basically. And what's happened is people have become remarkably indifferent to the quality of the English language and its application. Now, I know that with my snotty accent and I can't conceal it.
I'm going to refrain that with your accent.
Why are you being nice? I can't believe you said that. I know what it is. It's a humble accent. That's what it is. All this time I've been wondering. Very humble. The truth is, Sarah, that speaking and writing good English is a wonderful, wonderful gift. And I make this point particularly because it is interesting that I had, as you know, one of the finest educations in the UK. And what were the two subjects I failed? One was English, and the other one was public speaking.
Right.
I bring that to the table now because so many of us will almost judge ourselves by the standards of 50 years or 25 years ago. No, the standard that matters is the standard now, in the moment.
I'm just going to sneak in there for those of you that are listening. Go back and listen to our podcast on redemption, just based on what Jeremy just said in regards to that you failed English and failed public speaking. I'm going to leave that note there.
And that now it allows me to proceed accordingly, yes?
Yes.
Yes. That raises a very interesting point, and it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but I've heard it said that out of disorder, pain, suffering, out of all of those critical times in one's life, actually comes great creativity. The example that was given to me was Jimi Hendrix. So when you've got terrible pain in the background, it sometimes is a catalyst or an opening to some wonderful possibilities. So we're now talking about use of English, and I want to come out with a few thoughts about it. The reason it's important, one of them is clarity. One of the things in good governance is clearly defining the purpose of the organization. Mr. and Mrs. Business Person, would you please pay attention? I can't believe the number of corporate statements that have come out that are best described as marshmallows. They have no shape, they have no substance, and they're full of bad sugar. In other words, they're designed to sweeten you, and all they do is create diabetes and all sorts of nasty issues.
Okay.
So can we please understand this business of speaking good English and writing good English is, number one, for the purposes of clarity. It's for purposes of creativity. One of the things I have found is when you write something, and writing is one of the keys, we've talked about this over and again, writing is so valuable, but when you write and you write good English, in and of itself, it becomes creative because you start exploring different ways of expressing something. And the next thing you know, you're expressing a completely different idea. That is very exciting. It's called mind mapping. Mind mapping can happen much more powerfully when, in fact, we engage in writing and speaking good English. The other thing about speaking English is I can't believe the number of times that the corporate statement comes out. I've got two classics, three actually, but two classics. One of them is there's a sign over one of the banks in our local community, and it's a big standalone sign that says Banking Center. And if you take the use of English approach to this, the first thing you recognize is that the word banking and center are actually two nouns that have been used and shoved together. Actually, if you want to modify a noun, you need an adjective. So if you want to say great service or great center, that's fine. But banking as a noun and center as a noun put together like that leaves you with this question. Is it banking central to this particular opportunity? Or is this the center of banking on a worldwide basis? Give me a break. It is not the center of banking to the world. So as you analyze it and draw it out and think of the different meanings and applications, what actually comes out of it is you didn't mean that. And that's one of the great problems with corporatees. Brilliant at coming out with these marshmallow statements that are actually misleading and have no real value.
Mm.
As a matter of fact, they fail to dignify the English language. As you know, Respectonomics is foundationally the currency is dignity. And we want to see dignity applied not only in our lives, but how we apply. And the English as a way of communicating, it's a brilliant jewel in itself, and it requires dignifying.
Why do you
I,
think that happens with the corporations or the companies?
I think a certain amount of it is literally get it off my desk. Oh, banking center, that sounds good. Let it go. On
Right.
to the next thing. A little more, and that's why use of English is important because it actually slows you down. You have to think about what you've said and how it's expressed. You've said repeatedly, Sarah, you can
Words.
say anything, but how does it sound to the other person?
Mhm.
But this is just taking that skill, that process, taking it almost to its logical conclusion or its logical origin, and
Right.
saying how we speak English is very important. And when a corporation fails to speak, I think it's a camouflage. I think it shows a lack of courage. I think it shows a lack of intent, and it shows a lack of clear purpose or identity of purpose. It's not a pretty picture. There's another one. One of the corporate slogans I've heard recently is making your ambitions real. Sounds okay on the surface, but there's two huge problems with it. Number one, making an ambition real doesn't mean it means squat. I can have a
Right.
real ambition. It doesn't mean that it's a good one. It doesn't mean it's a bad one. It doesn't mean whether I'm going to succeed. All it does is it imprints it on a piece of paper to say my real ambition is, but it doesn't do any more than that. And the other problem is, and this is where the use of English is very powerful, because you look at the word ambition, and ambition is actually an ugly word. We think in terms of, I'm ambitious in the sense that you feel built up to do something. But how
Right.
often have you used the expression in a deprecating way? Oh, that person is very ambitious. It is not said kindly, typically. So going,
Yes, and you can think of some people think of ambitious as chasing.
fair enough.
Mhm.
Whichever way you look at it, it's a word that's creating something that isn't actually humanly very attractive, and also from a business point of view is probably a failure. How many
Right.
people in a corporate ladder are positioned ambitiously? They want to get to the top. That does not mean that they're doing a great job. That does not mean they're taking care of their fellow employee. That does not mean that they're necessarily taking care of the customers, the shareholders, or the suppliers,
Or themselves.
or themselves. So I think this whole business of use of English, I know I'm sounding almost Victorian. I know I'm sounding, gosh, are we all going to have to get out of grammar books? It is fascinating that when you start pulling the words apart and thinking how they connect with one another, not only does it release one's own personal creativity, but it also gives a far better sense to the other person of a new horizon and new possibilities. It's exciting. It's worth it.
Something I catch myself saying all the time is words matter.
Yeah.
So be thoughtful and intentional in the words that you are selecting and the words that you are using.
How many times, Sarah, have you experienced somebody saying something nasty to you
Mhm.
and you recoil and it really hurts and it's ugly and all that kind of stuff? If that is true, that the word can have that effect upon you or me, and I'll say me, if
Mhm.
that If the word can do that, then how important is it then to take the word and reframe it into something that is kind and empathetic and is drawing alongside the other individual?
Also has to do with the intentions behind the individual delivering
Mhm.
the words, right?
Absolutely. I want to give you two other thoughts on this, please. One is the issue of motivation. When we write good English, we generally speaking, we become far more motivated. It's a strange equation. I'm not sure it's an equation, it's probably a function of one or the other. But writing good English, speaking good English is in and of itself motivating. And I suppose one of the reasons is because it gives clarity of purpose. But it is certainly worth doing. Mind mapping is an exercise that was brought to me a few years ago. It's one that I use a great deal. Mind mapping is when you can take a subject and let your mind go to another place on related to that. Related doesn't mean it's the same, it just means related. So for example, I can look at the floor of the barn, and the next thing I can do is think about horse hooves.
Right.
They don't have to be literally logical, but they do. One maps connects to the other. It's a
Next.
very, very exciting exercise because it allows your mind, without you really pushing it, to expand. And the last thing I want to share about is we've talked about writing many a time. And in today's world, as you know, we are bombarded with all of this stuff that comes to us on the internet.
Right.
I'll just say the internet. And a lot of it is appallingly written. And if you think of it, the stuff that's appallingly written is usually not very memorable either. It
Mm,
falls into the marshmallow category again. One of the things that we're confronting is artificial intelligence. And I think the artificial is a word that makes sense because it is artificial, but the intelligence is actually a miss. I think it is actually the wrong word.
mm.
I think it's indigestible. It is very difficult to digest this so-called artificial intelligence because it doesn't actually reach into the inner part of one's character, one's person, one's spirituality, and so on. It's very metallic, it's very synthetic, gives all the right answers, but it
Mm.
misses the central point of addressing the inner dignity of the human being. To
What
address, sorry, the last thing I was going to say, to address the inner dignity of the human being, use of English is a way of treasuring and dignifying the way in which we communicate, are basically our currency one to another.
absolutely.
What were you going to say,
The
Sam?
only thing I was going to say in regards to the AI is it's a tool, it's a resource, and it certainly
Yeah,
does have its place.
yeah, absolutely.
It's again what you're using it for.
Yeah. I have no difficulty with that, but understanding, I call it indigestible because so often I've read these AI things, and I don't know if you've had this experience. You read it, and it just leaves you flat.
Right.
I mean, it might have all the right answers, but it doesn't have that excitement. It doesn't have that enthusiasm that only the human being can bring, and the human being can express that excitement by
Right.
using English effectively,
Language. Yeah.
language.
Excellent.
I rest my case.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Sarah.